Still many are supposed to join. A very warm welcome.
ಸರ್ ಅದು ಆಪರೇಟಿಂಗ್ ಸಿಸ್ಟಮ್ ಮಾಡಿದ್ರೆ ಸರ್ ಅದು ವಿಡಿಯೋಸ್ ಯೂಟ್ಯೂಬ್ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರಲ್ಲ ಅದೇ ತರ ಯಾವ್ದಾದ್ರು DS ವಿಡಿಯೋ ಹಾಕಿದ್ರ ಸರ್?
DS ಹಾಕಿಲ್ಲ ಅನ್ಸುತ್ತೆ. ಅಂದ್ರೆ I don't post everything onto YouTube. I just post some of the videos. I don't post everything that I teach. Okay. In today's class, I shall be discussing about loops with Java. Okay. So earlier, people were using assembly language to write their programs. So in case of assembly language, people were required to use mnemonics. Say for example, to move data, okay, we were using MOV instruction in case of 8085, 8086. Based on different processors, there used to be different assembly language mnemonics. Okay, move. To add, we had add instruction. Okay, these were referred to as the mnemonics. So writing programs using mnemonics was a bit difficult. Later on, okay, a new paradigm of programming languages got evolved, okay, which they refer to as the high-level language. So assembly language and both the machine language, these are considered to be low-level languages. Okay, the problem with low-level language is the programs that are written for a specific processor would work only on a system that supports that processor. Okay, every processor is associated with a set of instructions, and you are supposed to pick the instructions up from that instruction set when you are writing a program for the processor. And if the same program, if you wish to get executed on a different system that has a different processor, okay, that new processor cannot understand these instructions because, okay, it understands only the instructions that are present in the instruction set of that particular processor. So every time you were required to learn a new assembly language for every processor, and you were supposed to write the program based on the instructions, okay, that are picked up from that particular instruction set. So all low-level language programs are hardware dependent. Okay, they are hardware dependent or machine dependent. Okay, so to overcome this problem, they wanted, okay, to allow the users to carry the programs onto any system that has any hardware or any processor present in it. Okay, to allow the users to execute the programs on any system that has any hardware, that is to make a program hardware independent, they came up with a different okay, type of programming languages called as a high-level language. In case of a high-level language, the program that you write, okay, is not based on a particular processor. So you simply write the program using that language, and this program you shall be able to take onto any system that has any hardware or any processor present in it. Okay, whenever, say, I am writing a C program on the board, and I ask you to copy this down. I do not know what systems that you are using. What is the configuration of your systems also I do not know. So you are free to carry these programs onto your systems with some hardware, and you shall be able to get the answers. All of you shall be able to get the answers. So that is the advantage of using a high-level language to write our programs. So high-level language programs are therefore referred to as portable, okay, programs. High-level language programs are called as portable. that is easy to carry. So you can carry, they are hardware independent. Okay, unlike the low-level language programs such as assembly language programs, which are hardware dependent, high-level language programs are hardware independent. Okay, you can carry the programs onto any system that has any hardware. Okay, so we have two types of high-level languages. Okay, namely you have procedure-oriented programming language, shortly called as POP, and object-oriented programming language, shortly called as OOP. Okay, C language, okay, is considered to be one of the procedure-oriented programming languages. C is one of the, of course, it is also a high-level language only, but it comes under the category of POP, that is procedure-oriented programming language. In case of a POP, more emphasis or more focus is given towards writing of a function. Okay, you are not bothered about the data. Actually, we need to value the data more, but we never bother to care about the data when we are writing programs using POP. Okay, data is less significant or not at all significant for us as long as we are using a POP language. Okay, so POP is bothered only about the procedures or the functions that have to be written. Say for example, in the data structures subject that we discussed, okay, for example, in the program, the stack program, okay, how do we view any problem in case of a POP language? We view the problem as a set of functions. Stack problem, we view it as a set of functions: push, pop, display, and main. Similarly, the queue function, the queue program, that problem is viewed as a set of functions: insert, delete, display, and main. Okay, so any problem is viewed as a set of functions. Okay, so more importance is given towards functions only. We never bother about the data. Data is not at all important to us when we are using a high-level language. Okay, so sorry, when we are using a POP language. To overcome this problem, okay, we want to give more value to the data. Okay, a new paradigm of high-level languages was evolved. Okay, which they coined it as object-oriented programming language. In case of OOP, okay, data is given more importance, and okay, this data is protected. Here, data can freely move around the system. That is, the data, if you are declaring the data as a global variable, okay, you can access that data from any function that is present in the program. You can update that data from any of the functions present in the program. Okay, if it is declared as a global variable, that means data can freely move around the system in case of a POP. Whereas there is a restriction for the usage of data in case of OOP. Okay, so data is made available in a unit, in a separate unit, which we call as a class. And this data is accessible. Along with the data, you will also find another entity called as functions. You may also find functions that are present within a class, and the data that is present within the class is accessible only to the functions that are present within the class. Any external function that is not a part of this particular unit, that is not a part of the class, okay, if it tries to access the data, okay, it will not allow. So there is a restriction on the usage of data. So to allow this restriction, we are trying to use a new concept called as OOP. In case of OOP, more emphasis is given towards data rather than the functions. Functions we will be using, but we prefer giving more importance to data, and data is, we value data more than anything else. Okay. So in case of OOP, we view any problem as a set of classes. Okay, here in case of POP, we view a problem as a set of functions, whereas here we view a problem as a set of classes and their corresponding objects. So any problem that we are supposed to solve, we will be viewing that problem as a set of classes and their corresponding objects. Okay, you can consider, I will come to those terms later on. I will try to define classes, objects, etc. after some time. Okay, so POP follows a top-down approach. Okay, we say POP follows top-down approach, while OOP language follows bottom-up approach. That is, in case of C language, okay, in case of a C language program, we start writing a main, and then we start defining the other functions that are supposed to be written after main, correct? So you can say that we are following the top-down approach. However, while writing a C++ or a Java program, which are considered to be OOP languages, okay, we prefer writing classes. Okay, then we shall be writing a main, and within main we shall be creating objects for those classes, and then we shall be invoking the methods or the functions that are present within the class through those objects. So we say we are following the bottom-up approach. Okay, so these are some of the similarities and the differences that exist between the two types of high-level languages, namely POP and OOP. Okay, so now let us come to the basic concepts of OOP. OOP, okay, if at all I want to call a particular high-level language as a OOP language, it has to support few concepts, such as it has to support a class concept. Okay, what is a class? A class, as I told, okay, is a unit that can store what and what data it can store, and also it can store the functions. Okay, so data is referred to as fields. Okay, data is referred to as fields in Java, and functions are referred to as methods. Okay, so a class you can say as a collection of fields and methods. Okay, how to write a class, how to declare a class, how to use it, will be seeing later on. Okay, so now if suppose I have what is called as a duster. Okay, so duster, pen, I have these tools. Let us assume these tools as the tools required for teaching. Correct? Say each of them, the duster, the pen, the marker pen, okay, the board, etc. Each of these things can be considered as they can be considered as what? As the objects, and a collection of all these similar objects, okay, will provide me, will allow me to define a class called as classroom. A classroom must have all these things, right? So a classroom can typically have what as the members? What are the different members of this classroom? Okay, the objects of this classroom. Okay, I need to have a duster. Duster can be considered as one type of object. Then the marker pen. Okay, the board, etc. These you can consider as the objects of this particular class. Okay, or you can say a class is a collection of similar type of objects. Okay, you cannot combine, you cannot group a duster with that of a door and with that of a dining table. Okay, they are not related, right? So if at all you are grouping, you should try to group similar objects. So a collection of such similar objects will form what is called as a class. Okay, this is okay, briefly regarding a class. Now coming to objects. Okay, you can say an object as a basic runtime entity. Okay, an object is a runtime entity that is available in an object-oriented environment. In a OOP environment, we need to have runtime environment. A classroom during the runtime, a class called as classroom during the runtime may take different forms, such as it can take the form of a duster, it can take the form of a marker, it can take the form of a board, okay, etc. So a basic runtime entity is referred to as an object. You can say like this, okay, you can consider that if class is considered to be, if suppose class is we are considering a class as a house. Okay, let us assume a class as a house. Okay, this house, okay, you view this as a class, and you need to have to be able to access the TV that you have placed in your house. Okay, you need to enter the house first. Okay, you shall be able to enter the house only through the key. Okay, you need to have the key to be able to access your items that are present in the house. Okay, so you can consider TV as something like as a data or a field that is present inside the class. The class, I told, will have two things. Two types of members can be present, namely the data or the fields and the functions or the methods. Okay, so you can consider to be able to access the field. Okay, what do you need? You need to have that is present within the house. You need to have a key. Okay, to be able to access this item that is present in the house. So likewise, for the class, you need to have what is called as an object to be able to access the items that are present in the class. Okay, so similar to a key that exists for a house. Okay, we need to have an object. Okay, to be able to access the members of a class. So what are the members of a class? The members of a class are fields and methods, or data and functions. They are called in Java, they are referred to as fields and methods. Okay, now this part is over. Now we covered two important concepts of OOP, namely classes and objects. Okay, then we have what is called as data encapsulation. Data encapsulation. What do you mean by encapsulation? Trying to write, as I told, within a class. Okay, what do we write? We try to write data as well as methods. Okay, so who can access the data? Only the methods that are present within the class shall be able to access the data. Okay, no other external methods will be allowed to touch this particular data. So, okay, by trying to place data and methods within a class, we are trying to protect this particular data. So we are trying to have these two things in the form of a capsule. Okay, if you consider class as a capsule, okay, what is present in this capsule? Data and methods. So only the methods are allowed to access this data. No other external entity is allowed to access this particular data. So, okay, the process of binding together the data along with methods, the process of binding together of data and methods within a single unit such as a class is referred to as data encapsulation. Okay, data encapsulation is the process of binding together data along with methods within a single entity such as a class. That is referred to as data encapsulation. So through this data encapsulation, what is it that we are going to achieve? We are going to achieve security for the data. We are ensuring that only the methods that are present within the class shall be able to access this data. No other external things are allowed to access the data. Okay, so this way we can ensure protection of the data. So data encapsulation allows us to protect data from other external things. Okay, that is data encapsulation. Then we have data abstraction. We have something called as data abstraction. Okay, what do you mean by data abstraction? Okay, say now I have a class called student. Class student. Say there is the members are string name, int roll, float avg. So these are the fields of this particular class. So these are the fields. I have tried to write directly a Java class here. So the class student has these fields name, role, and avg that belong to different data types. So now, whenever I want, what do I do? Whenever I want to create a variable like this, okay, I am trying to write a statement like this. That is, I am trying to write student boy. Boy is equal to new student. When I write like this, what is going to happen? Okay, this boy is treated as, I am trying to create what is called as an object. So this statement, student boy, you can compare this statement with a statement such as int a. Is it not? See this statement. Okay, you can compare with a statement such as int a. You see here at the place of int. Okay, that is at the place of the data type. I am trying to write what I am trying to write. Student. Student is what? Student is considered as a class. So at the type at the place of data type, I am trying to use a what is called as a class, and at the place of a variable, I am trying to write what is called as an object. So through this, what am I trying to do? I am trying to create a new type. Okay, this statement, okay, tells me that I am going to create a new type called as student. Okay, which is what? Which is nothing but a class. Class contains what and what? I told you class contains fields and also some methods can be present within a class. Correct? So I am trying to create a new type called as student. Okay, called as student, which is a class. Class contains fields and methods. What is this concept called? Okay, trying to bind together fields and methods, okay, into a single unit. This process we refer to as encapsulation. The class is, okay, this class is making use of encapsulation. Correct? Class is making use of encapsulation. So I can call class as an encapsulated item. It is an because it is making use of encapsulation. It is encapsulating fields and methods. Okay, I can consider class as an encapsulated item. Okay, so here you can say we are trying the process of creating a new type. Okay, that is at the place of the data type int. I am writing the class name student, right? So trying the process of creating a new type, okay, by making use of what I have made use of. I have made use of a class. Class is making use of encapsulation. So I can call this as an encapsulated item. So the process of creating a new data type by using an encapsulated item, okay, is referred to as, okay, data abstraction. This we refer to as data abstraction. Okay, so that means data abstraction. That means boy has all these three types of members are there for boy. If suppose I create one more object called as girl, girl also has, okay, these three types of okay, fields. So the data, this data is hidden. Correct? This data is hidden from one another. So that means boy has a separate set of name, role, and AVG. Likewise, girl also has a separate set of memory locations to store name, role, and AVG. So, but here at this level, at the level of objects, okay, this is not visible to me. At the level of objects, this is not visible to me. So I can call this as abstraction. Actually, the term abstraction means hiding the background details and providing the necessary services. The term abstraction is referred to as providing the necessary services by hiding the background details. So that is referred to as abstraction. Say for example, you are not interested in, okay, how did I prepare for this subject? You are not interested to know about all that information. Like from which books did I learn this subject? Okay, how much time did I take to learn this subject? Okay, in front of whom did I learn this subject? Okay, so all these information are not important to you. You are interested only in the service. That is, you are interested in learning only, okay, the concepts from me, the lecture from me. You are interested in only getting my services. You are not interested in knowing about these details. So this concept is referred to as abstraction. Okay, trying to provide essential services by hiding the background details. This is referred to as abstraction. And data abstraction means the process of creating a new type by using an encapsulated item such as a class, okay, is referred to as data abstraction. Okay, so that is data abstraction. So we covered the okay, what are the concepts of group that we discussed so far? We discussed about class, then we discussed about an object. Class is a collection of similar objects, or you can say class is a collection of fields and methods. Okay, what is an object? Runtime entity. Basic runtime entity available in an object-oriented system is referred to as an object. Then we discussed about encapsulation. What do you mean by encapsulation? The process of binding together, okay, fields with the methods within a single unit such as a class is referred to as encapsulation. Next, fourth point is data abstraction. What do you mean by data abstraction? The process of creating a new type, okay, such as say student is a new type that I am trying to create. The process of creating a new type by using an encapsulated item is referred to as data abstraction. So next important concept that the language should support in order to be called an OOP language, okay, along with these four concepts, it should also exhibit what feature? It should support the feature called as inheritance. What do you mean by inheritance? The process of creating a new entity from an existing entity. Okay. So here I am trying to create a new entity called Y from an existing entity called X. In this process, the newly formed entity would have acquired all or some of the features from its base entity, from its parent. So, okay, this entity is called as the base class, and this entity you can call as the derived class. Okay, the newly formed class would have acquired all the characteristics, okay, or at least some of the characteristics from its parent, and it can also have some new characteristics which were not present in its parent. It can also have few. It is like this. You okay, would have acquired all characteristics, all bad qualities from your parents, okay, and also you might have some new bad qualities, okay, which were not present in your parents. Usually you will not inherit all good qualities from your parents. You will only inherit all bad qualities from your parents, okay, and along with those bad qualities that you have inherited from your parents, you can also have some bad characteristics which were not present in your parents. So this concept, okay, is referred to as, what is this referred to as? Inheritance. Inheritance is the process of creating a new entity from an already existing entity. Okay, this concept is called as inheritance. We have different types of inheritance. What is shown here is called as single level inheritance. This is called as single level. Single level means there is a father, and for this father there is a child, and the child doesn't have a children. We don't have children. So the family structure ends at one level. So this type of inheritance, appa appanige maga maganige makkililla. You are not supposed to write this. Okay, appa maga maganige makkililla. That is trying to derive a class from an existing class, and further not trying to derive classes for the newly derived class is referred to as single level. Okay, then we have multi-level inheritance. What do you mean by multi-level inheritance? Okay, in case of multi-level inheritance, you will be trying to, okay, derive other classes from the newly derived class. See, Y is a newly derived entity. From Y, I am trying to derive one more new entity called as Z. From Z, you can derive one more new entity and so on. So here, family structure, okay, will go beyond one level. Okay, here it has got extended up to the second level. So this type of inheritance is referred to as multi-level inheritance. Single level inheritance, multi-level inheritance. Okay. Then we have, okay, hierarchical inheritance. We have another type of inheritance called as hierarchical inheritance. In case of hierarchical inheritance, Okay, a father can have so many children. Okay, or you can say father is not following family planning. So many children are there. Okay, to this father. This type of inheritance is referred to as hierarchical inheritance. Okay, you are not supposed to write my answers. Okay, in your exams. This is just to make you remember the concept without any confusion. I would try to give such examples. So, how can you technically define hierarchical inheritance? Trying to derive more than one class from a single base class. Trying to derive more than one class from a single base class is referred to as hierarchical inheritance. And we have, okay, another type of inheritance called as multiple inheritance. Okay, another type of inheritance called, okay, you should not get confused with multi-level with multiple. Okay, so multi-level is trying to derive a new entity from the newly derived entity, that is going beyond one level, is called as multi-level. What I am going to discuss now is a different one. What is this called? It is multiple inheritance. What do you mean by multiple inheritance? Trying to derive a new entity, okay, from more than one base entity. Unfortunately, I can't give any live examples for this type of inheritance. Trying to derive an entity from more than one base entity is referred to as multiple inheritance. Okay, I can't give any live examples for this, so you can remember it that way. The type of inheritance for which sir could not give any live example, that is nothing but what type of inheritance? Multiple inheritance. Okay, then I have one more type of inheritance called as hybrid inheritance. Okay.
Sir, ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸರಿ ಹೇಳಿ
Yes,
multi-level inheritance ನ.
huh?
Multi-level inheritance, multiple inheritance ಇನ್ನೊಂದು ಸರಿ ಹೇಳಿ ಸರ್.
ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಕಾಣಿಸ್ತಾ ಇದೆಯಾ?
ಹೌದೌದು, ಹೌದೌದು.
ಅಪ್ ಟು ಝಡ್ ವರ್ಗೂ ಇದೆ ಅನ್ಕೋ. ಇಲ್ಲಿ ಯಾವುದೋ ಒಂದು ಎನ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಒಂದು ಎಂಟಿಟಿ ಇದೆ. ಟ್ರೈಂಗ್ ಟು ಡಿರೈವ್ ಒನ್ ಎಂಟಿಟಿ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಮೋರ್ ದನ್ ಒನ್ ಎಂಟಿಟಿ. ಓಕೆ, ಇದಕ್ಕೆ ನಾನು ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಯಾವುದು ಕೊಡಕ್ ಆಗಲ್ಲ. ಬೋರ್ಡ್ ಮೇಲೆ ಇರೋದನ್ನ ನೋಡು. ದೇರ್ ಈಸ್ ಒನ್ ಸಿಂಗಲ್ ಎಂಟಿಟಿ ಡಿರೈವ್ಡ್ ಫ್ರಮ್ ಮೋರ್ ದನ್ ಒನ್ ಬೇಸ್ ಕ್ಲಾಸ್. So this type of inheritance is referred as multiple inheritance. So next type of inheritance that we can use is the hybrid inheritance. In case of hybrid inheritance, okay, I can try to use mix more than one type of inheritance. You see here, from here till here, single base class, more than one child, no family planning. What is this called? This is called as hierarchical inheritance. Correct? And from here till here, this part, okay, trying to derive a single child from more than one base class. What is this called? This is called as multiple inheritance. Okay, I am trying to mix up, okay, hierarchical with multiple. So combination of any two types of inheritance is called as hybrid inheritance. Okay, combination of any two types of inheritance, okay, results in an inheritance called as hybrid inheritance. What you are seeing now, okay, is just an example for hybrid inheritance. Okay, so how do we do this? We shall be learning later. Okay, now, okay, in any Java program, what do you write? Usually you try to write, okay, import statement. Okay, in the programs you would try to write import statement. You would be writing the name of the main package. The main package that you would be using quite often in your programs would be Java. So import java dot, okay, io dot asterisk, or import java dot util dot asterisk. These are some of the import statements that you would have used commonly in all of your, most of your Java programs. Okay, so the structure of a Java program would typically involve import statements. One or more number of import statements you will find, okay, at the beginning of the program. And in some programs, okay, especially in the package programs, okay, if you are trying to create your own packages, that is user defined packages, then the package statement, okay, should come ahead of the import statements. Okay, you can create any package with the whatever convenient name you wish. I am trying to create a package called as a nir. So this statement typically is the first executable statement of any Java program. So immediately after a package statement, you may find one or more import statements. Okay, then you would be writing the class definition. How do you write the class definition? Okay, typically a class will begin with the keyword class, and here you will give some name, any valid name tag you will be using for the class, and you will write several declarations. You would be writing several declarations here. Declarations of what? Different fields you will be declaring, as discussed in the previous example. Okay, you would be writing class student. In class student, the fields that I had used were string name, int role, float avg. So they are all what kinds of statements? Declaration statements. And later on, okay, what else a class can contain? Class can contain only two types of members. Fields can be present, and method definitions, okay, you will be writing. So declarations, field declarations, and method definitions you will be writing within these braces. Okay, so so this is typically, and one of the important methods that you will be writing in a Java program is the public static void main method. Okay, so the main method, you all know, the heart and soul of any C program or a Java program or a C++ program is the main method. In C, we were referring to that as a function. Here, we will be referring to that as a method. Okay, whatever we used to refer to as a function, in Java terminology, it is referred to as a method. Okay, now I would be writing public static void main. So this is typically the way I would be writing, okay, the main method, and I would be writing string. This is the class name, and you can write, usually in your books, okay, you would have found args and empty square brackets. Okay, is the parameter. It is nothing but an array of objects of which type? String type. So this need not be args. Okay, most of you might be under the feeling that it should be args only. It need not be args. It can be anything. So usually I write first letter of my name, N. Okay, string N. You can write, but many of your teachers, okay, would have used args only, because they would have seen args in most of the textbooks, and thinking that compulsorily you are required to use args, they would have started using args, and you will be under the impression that it should be args only, and therefore you would have used args in all programs that you have used. However, it need not be args. It can be any name that you wish to give for this particular array of objects. So the main method is an important method. So it takes this signature public. We write this public so that, okay, we want the control to enter to the main method. Okay, we want the control to enter to the main method at any point of time. So therefore, that should be made public. That should be made that public. Okay, how can I make it public? By writing the keyword public, I can make it public. Okay, then the method is declared as static. Okay, I will tell about static members after some time. Okay, but keep in mind that if you are using static in front of either a field or in front of a method, then it is not a part of what you need to understand. Then you must understand that this particular entity is not a part of an object. It is beyond the scope of an object. That is, it is a part of the class. So to tell that, okay, in order to bring out the main, if static is not used, main would become a part of a single object. Okay, it will not go beyond the scope of an object. So we want main to be accessible, okay, to the entire class. Okay, we want main to be made a part of the class, not a part of an object. So for that reason, Okay, I will tell more about in depth. Okay, I will be covering about static methods or static members after some time as we progress. Okay, because this is the first initial foundation of the course of the subject. I cannot tell more about static at this point of time. So just keep in mind that the keyword static, okay, makes that particular field or method accessible to, tells that it is not a part of an object. Instead, it is part of something which is a part of the class. So for that purpose, I am using static. And why do you know? It suggests that main is not returning us anything. So it is the return type. You would have already seen this kind of statements. Void main you would have written in C, correct? So similarly, there also void you used to represent what? To indicate nothing is being returned from main. We were writing void even in case of C or in C++. The same notation is followed here also. And here, to accommodate command line arguments, that most of the times we will not be passing command line arguments to our Java programs. But okay, even if we wish to pass, whether we wish to pass the command line arguments or not, okay, it is already made compulsory to get used in the syntax. Okay, whether you are using command line arguments or not, okay, in your program, but still, okay, the main method is allowed to accept command line arguments. So those command line arguments that you are providing from the command line will enter this particular array of objects. So we shall discuss about all that after some time. Okay, so this is the basic structure of a class. After closing main, I need to close the class also. So I would write a closing braces at this point of time. Okay. Along with this, you may also find comments. Okay. You may find what are called as comments. So comment is a non-executable statement. Comment is a non-executable statement. Okay. Why is it necessary to write a comment in a program? It is not considered by the compiler. The compiler just ignores whatever comes within a comment, but still we would be writing comments at few points of the program. Wherever we feel them to be necessary, we will be including the comments. When they are not considered by the compiler, what is the purpose of including comments? Can somebody answer to my question? When comments are ignored by the compiler, what is the purpose of writing the comments in
understandability of code?
Who should understand?
Means who is reading the code? Like author, writer.
Okay.
I'm not getting perfect.
I'll come to that.
Yes.
See, most of the things what we do in our lives, we will not be doing for our sake. See, the class, whatever I am trying to take, I do not want this class to be taken for my sake. Okay. Okay. And similarly, I have written several books, 21 books I have written. I have not written those books, okay, so that I can read for myself. I have written the books so that you guys can read. Okay. And similarly, you guys have started studying your diploma or going to study your BTech, okay, and so on. Why are you doing this? Because you are doing this job to keep your parents happy. You are not doing this job to okay, for your sake. Correct? Most of the things what we do in our lives, we will not be doing for our sake. We will be doing these things for others' sake. Correct? ನೀವು ಡಿಪ್ಲೊಮಾ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇರೋದು ನಿಮ್ ತಂದೆ ತಾಯಿಗೋಸ್ಕರ ತಾನೇ?
No, sir.
ನಿಮ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರನೇ ಮಾಡ್ತಾ ಇದ್ದೀರಾ? Okay, but most of the things what we do, we will be doing for the sake of others. ಹಂಗೇನೆ fortunately or unfortunately, if you all become okay, software engineers, okay, in future, ನೀವೆಲ್ಲ ಫಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ಲಿ ಆರ್ ಅನ್ಫಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ಲಿ ಅದೃಷ್ಟವಶಾತ್ ಅಥವಾ ದುರದೃಷ್ಟವಶಾತ್ ನೀವೆಲ್ಲರೂ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಆಗ್ಬಿಟ್ರಿ ಅನ್ಕೊಳ್ಳೋಣ. ಅದೃಷ್ಟವಶಾತ್ ಯಾರಿಗೆ? ನಿಮ್ಗೆ. ದುರದೃಷ್ಟವಶಾತ್ ಯಾರಿಗೆ? ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಯಾರು ನಿಮ್ಮನ್ನ ತಗೊಂಡಿದಾರೋ ಅವ್ರಿಗೆ. ಕರೆಕ್ಟಾ? ಸೊ ಫಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ಲಿ ಆರ್ ಅನ್ಫಾರ್ಚುನೇಟ್ಲಿ, ಇಫ್ ಯು ಬಿಕಮ್ ಸಾಫ್ಟ್ವೇರ್ ಇಂಜಿನಿಯರ್ಸ್ ಟುಮಾರೋ, ಏನಾಗ್ಬೋದು? ಯು ಆರ್ ರೈಟಿಂಗ್, ಓಕೆ, ನೀವು ಕೋಡ್ ಬರೆಯಪ್ಪ ಅಂತ ಹೇಳ್ತಾರೆ. ನೀನ್ ಬರೆಯೋ ಕೋಡು ನಿನ್ಗೋಸ್ಕರ ನೀನ್ ಬರ್ಕೊಳ್ಳಲ್ಲ. You want others present in your team to also read and understand. Correct? ನಿಮ್ಗೆ ಇಷ್ಟ ಬಂದಂಗೆ ನೀನ್ ಬರ್ಕೊಂಡು ಹೋದ್ರೆ okay, others may find it difficult to read and understand your programs. So to make them understand what is it that you are going to do, it is a good practice to include comments wherever it is necessary. Though the comments are ignored by the compiler, it is still necessary for you to include comments wherever they are necessary. So a comment definitely improves the readability of the program. Yarge readability yare nodbek ankondavrge, okay, it will give clarity about what is being done annodana okay, through sentences, through simple sentences you would have explained. Okay, so that is necessary for others to read and understand your program. So to improve the readability of a program, it is a good practice to include comments wherever necessary. So comments now CLA, okay, we were using multi-lined comments. Okay, that means slash star and star slash madhya. You could have written n number of lines of text. So these comments, multi-lined comments are okay. Multi-line comments are allowed in Java also. Multi-line comments use ಮಾಡಬಹುದು. C++ ಅಲ್ಲಿ you had single line comments. ಅಂದ್ರೆ ಒಂದು ಲೈನ್ ಟೆಕ್ಸ್ಟ್, this program finds the sum, this program finds the sum ಅಂತ ಬರೀತಾರೆ. ಒಂದು ಲೈನ್ ಇದ್ದಾಗ ಓಕೆ, ಇದರಲ್ಲಿ ಬರಿಬಹುದು ಒಂದು ಲೈನು, ಬಟ್ ಇದು ಸ್ಟಾರ್ಟಿಂಗ್ ಪೇರ್ ಎಂಡಿಂಗ್ ಪೇರ್ ಬರೀಲೇಬೇಕು. So here, however, C++ ಅಲ್ಲಿ single line comments they introduced. Okay, single line comments ಅಲ್ಲಿ you don't have to indicate the end. You have to only indicate the beginning of that particular line. Okay, in Python ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಕೂಡ you have percentage symbol ಎಲ್ಲ ಇದೆಯಲ್ಲ. So they just are used to indicate what? They are used to indicate the beginning. So maximum a line ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಇರೋ complete sentence is ignored by the compiler. So you can also use single line comments of C++. In Java dalli you can use multi-line comments of C that idanna ettakonidare ellinda C inda. Okay, they have also allowed you to use single line comments. Idanna ellinda ettakonidare C++ inda ettakonidare. Along with these two, okay, in Java, okay, they have allowed you to use one more type of comments called as documentation comments or the doc comments. Okay, doc alla doc, doc comments. Okay, usually they begin with either multi-line comment tarane slash star star slash, but yenappa andre doc comments will have double asterisk after the slash, and while closing it's a single star only, single asterisk only. So these are also multi-line comments. Usually now multi-line comments are doc comments when we use means to provide details such as author, date of creation, okay, size of the program and so on. So such details can be provided. Such documentation details is necessary, okay, for the team to have. So yavan ಮಾಡ್ದ ಇದು, okay, ಯಾರು ನೀವು ಇವಾಗ 10 ಜನ, say 10 of you are working on a single project. Okay, tomorrow you may leave and go, or say you have developed some part, there is some error in that particular part. They will not be able to understand. Okay, they will not be able to approach a particular person if these details are missing. At least looking at those details, oh, you na madidi kelsa, hey baraya illi, okay, what is the mistake that you have done? You see this mistake, you rectify this mistake, and they can ask. So to write this, it is necessary to maintain such details also. So in the details na store madkodake we can use what is called as documentation comments or the doc comments. So doc comments ಅನ್ನೋದು ಜಾವಾ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಸ್ಪೆಷಲ್ ಆಗಿ ಅಲೋ ಮಾಡಿದ್ದಾರೆ. ನೀವು ಕೇಳಬಹುದು, ಸರ್ ಇಂಥ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ನಾನು ಮಾಮೂಲಿ ಸಿ ಕಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಮಲ್ಟಿಲೈನ್ ಕಮೆಂಟ್ಸ್ ಅಲ್ಲಿ ಬರೆದ್ರೆ ತಪ್ಪಾ? ನೋ ಪ್ರಾಬ್ಲಮ್, ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನ್ ಆಲ್ವೇಸ್ ಯೂಸ್. ಬಟ್ ಜಾವಾಗೆ ಅಂತಾನೆ there are dedicated comments called as documentation comments. Okay, ಇಂಥ ಡೀಟೇಲ್ಸ್ ಬರೀಲಿ ಅಂತಾನೆ documentation comments ಇಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ. So you can write all these details within the documentation comments. Okay, so ಇದು comments ಬಗ್ಗೆ ಆಯ್ತು. Then you have what are called as keywords. Okay. So now I am trying to discuss about different tokens. Token andre eno? Token is that unit which cannot be further divided. ಯಾವ ವರ್ಡ್ ನಾನು ಇನ್ನು ಹೆಚ್ಚಿಗೆ ಡಿವೈಡ್ ಮಾಡಕ್ಕೆ ಚಾನ್ಸ್ ಇಲ್ವೋ. ಫಾರ್ ಎಕ್ಸಾಂಪಲ್ ಮೈನ್ ಅನ್ನೋದು ಒಂದು ವರ್ಡ್. ಈ ಮೈನ್ ನ MAIN ಅಂತ ಸ್ಪೇಸ್ ಬಿಟ್ರೆ ಇಟ್ ರಿಸಲ್ಟ್ಸ್ ಇನ್ an error. So an undivisible unit which cannot be divided further, such a unit is referred to as a token. So ಈ ತರ ಜಾವಾ ಟೋಕನ್ಸ್ ಆಪರೇಟರ್ಸ್ ಯಾವ್ಯಾವ ಇದೆಯೋ ಅವೆಲ್ಲಾನು ಟೋಕನ್ಸ್ ಅಂತಾನೆ ಕನ್ಸಿಡರ್ ಮಾಡ್ತೀವಿ. Then we have keywords. What are keywords? Every programming language that we try to use is associated with a set of words which will have some predefined meaning. ಯಾರು ಅದಕ್ಕೆ ಮೀನಿಂಗ್ ಬರ್ದಿಟ್ಟಿದ್ದಾರೆ? ಆ ಡೆವಲಪರ್ಸ್ ಯಾರಿದಾರೋ, whoever are the developers, they would have developed, they would have defined those terms. Such words are referred to as keywords, or they are also referred to as reserved words. Okay, so similar to the C language which has some keywords, C++ language also has some keywords. Even Java has its own set of words such as auto. Okay, and usually one more similarity what you find between C++ and Java is all keywords are written in lowercase in these languages. Okay, ellanu lowercase letters alle baritivi. All keywords are written in lowercase, and keywords must not be used as variable names in your programs. ಈ ವರ್ಡ್ಸ್ ತಂಟೆಗೆ ಮಾತ್ರ ನೀವು ಹೋಗಬಾರ್ದು. ವೆನ್ಎವರ್ ಯು ವಾಂಟ್ ಟು ಗಿವ್ ಸಮ್ ನೇಮ್, ಸ್ಟ್ರಿಂಗ್ ಆರ್ಗ್ಸ್ ಅಂತ ಬರೆದ್ವಲ್ಲ, ಆರ್ಗ್ಸ್ ಅನ್ನೋ ಜಾಗದಲ್ಲಿ ತಗೊಂಬಂದು ಯು ಕ್ಯಾನಾಟ್ ಯೂಸ್ ಎ ಕೀವರ್ಡ್. ಯು ಆರ್ ನಾಟ್ ಸಪೋಸ್ ಟು ಟಚ್ these words. You are not supposed to use these words as variable names in your programs. So keywords are written in lowercase. They are the words that have predefined meaning. Who would have given the meaning for those words? The developers would have given the meaning for those words at the time of developing the language. They would have defined some meaning, and you are not supposed to use those words as variable names, and those words must be written only in lowercase letters. So keywords also are a type of tokens. Okay, then we then have operators. Let us look at different data types we have. Let us try to look at the data types and then look at the different operators. The different data types of Java. The different data types of Java are, we have numeric and non-numeric data types, numeric types and non-numeric types. Under non-numeric types, you have char, boolean. These are non-numeric types. Okay. And numeric types, you have again two categories. The two categories of numeric types are integer types and floating point types. Floating point types. You have four types of integers, unlike in C. C alli namge ishtondu integer types irlilla. Okay, yavyavu? There are four integer types, namely byte, byte, all letters lowercase, short, all letters lowercase, int, all letters lowercase, and long. So the four basic integer types that are available in Java are byte, short, int, and long. How many bytes these variables? Say I am declaring a variable called byte A. Okay, A is declared under the type of byte. For A, one memory location is given. How many bytes should be given for this location? It would allocate 1 byte. Okay, the size of this memory location will be 1 byte. Okay, if I am declaring short, a variable under short type, for B, it would allocate how many bytes? 2 bytes are allocated. So byte occupies 1 byte, short occupies 2 bytes. Observe, in C, short was being given 1 byte and int was being given 2 bytes. Correct? Short data type was being given 1 byte in C, whereas here the size of int was 2 bytes in C, whereas here the size of short itself is 2 and the size of int is 4. It is not 2. Okay, so an integer variable, if I am trying to declare an integer variable called C, for C, okay, it would have given totally how many bytes? 4 bytes would have been given for the variable C. And long is given 8 bytes of memory. And long is given 8 bytes of memory. So these are the four types of integers: byte, short, int, and long. And how many bytes they all occupy? You need not have to by heart the sizes. Okay, byte 1, byte 1, short 2, int 4, float, long 8, long 8. This way you need not have to by heart. You can very easily remember. Okay, you just remember the order: byte, short, int, long. 8421, you know BCD code. You just write 8421 in the reverse order. You remember byte, short, int, long, this order. Okay, and write 8421 in the reverse order. This is the size of each and every type. Okay, floating point types. We have two floating point types, namely float and double. A float occupies 4 bytes and double occupies 8 bytes. So this is similar to C++ only. Okay, so these are the different numeric types that are available in Java. Then we have non-numeric types. What are the different non-numeric types? We have two non-numeric types, namely char and boolean. Okay, char, as you all know, is used to deal with characters, single character. Okay, we would be using char type. Okay, and to deal with strings, what we used to do in C, we used to declare a string as a character array. Char str of 20. I used to write that way to deal with a string in C, right? However, in Java, the developers themselves have created a built-in type is there available called as string. One built-in class is there. It's a class. So you can make use of this built-in class, okay, to deal with what are called as strings. Okay. So char, unlike in C, char in C used to occupy 1 byte. Correct? Here, char of Java occupies how many bytes? 2 bytes. Okay. Char in C was following, char of C was occupying 1 byte and it was following ASCII code. American Standard Code for Information Interchange, ASCII code, which was a 7-bit code that was being used. Okay, here, okay, in the char of Java, which occupies 2 bytes, it will not follow the ASCII code. It will instead follow what is called as the Unicode. See, to be able to accommodate more number of symbols, whatever is the size, 1 byte andre 8 bits, ASCII code ಅಲ್ಲಿ 7 bits ಇದೆ. So 7 bits andre, okay, the combinations that you can reach, maximum you can go up to 255 characters only. Maximum 255 characters you can encode using 1 byte. Okay, so you cannot encode all characters that are present in the world. So ಒಂದೊಂದು ಜಾಗಗಳಲ್ಲೂ ಒಂದೊಂದು ಕಂಟ್ರಿಯಲ್ಲೂ they will have their own symbols. So it is not possible to deal with all such kinds of symbols. Okay, when I am using a single byte for char. To deal with such symbols, Java developers have come out with what is called as Unicode characters. Okay, so therefore we have accommodated 2 bytes to deal with characters. Okay, then we have Boolean type, which will take either true or false as the values. Okay, so a Boolean variable can either have a true value or a false value. Let me have some water. Okay, so even these are considered as non-numeric types. So after having discussed about these data types, let me tell you about typecasting. Okay, what is typecasting? Converting a value of one type into, or typecasting is also called as type conversion. Okay, typecasting is also called as type conversion. Transforming a value of one type into another type. Okay, say 5. I am transforming 5 into 5.0. 5 is of int type. 5.0 is of float type. So changing a value from one type to another type is called as typecasting, and based on whether this conversion is happening automatically or with the intervention of the user or the programmer. Okay, if it is happening automatically, then we call that as implicit casting. We call that as implicit casting, and if it is happening through the intervention of the programmer, then it is called as explicit casting. Okay, implicit and explicit. Okay, and you should be very careful when you are trying to perform typecasting. Okay, let us take one simple example. Say I have a variable of byte type. Byte A is equal to 5. Okay, what I will do, I will long B is equal to A, I will write. Long B is equal to A, I am writing. What is happening here? A, A is the source type. A is the source. B is the destination or the target. Destination or the target. Okay. Target type is a larger type. Long occupies how many bytes? 8 bytes. I told you. Byte occupies how many bytes? 1 byte of memory. So yeah. What did I write? Long B is equal to A, I have written. A is, that is source type, is a smaller type compared to the destination type. Correct? Source, that is A, is of smaller type compared to the destination type. Then there is no problem. It is similar to this. Say you are staying in a single bedroom house. Okay, the owner of your house, you are paying rent for your single bedroom house. The owner of your house builds a bigger building than that. Okay, say it's a 8-bedroom house. He will give an offer to you because you have been staying in his house for so many years and you are very prompt in paying the rent. The house owner, say he gives an offer to you. He will tell you to move to his new house, that is 8-bedroom house, for the same rent that you were paying for single bedroom house. A single bedroom house rent get you now go to my 8-bedroom house. If suppose he gives that offer, will you go or you will not go for the same rent? Happily you will go. Okay, you will not have any problem in shifting to a larger house than where you are currently living. Correct? Without any problem, you will go. Similarly, okay, when I am trying to send a value of smaller type into a larger type, okay, the destination or the target type is a larger type compared to the source type. So then there is no problem. Happily, this conversion will happen. So this type of conversion here, automatically value is getting converted into this through a assignment statement. This is happening automatically, and here source type is lesser than the destination type or the target type. So this is called as promotion or widening. So promotion or widening is always acceptable. Promotion or widening, okay, you don't have any problem with this. Either explicit casting andre, explicit casting difference nodi, instead of writing long B is equal to A, you will be writing long B is equal to long of A. You just see here, what did I write? In front of A, I am writing the destination type. Destination type is what? Long. This I am writing in brackets. So So before it writes A into B, what it will do to A? It will convert A into long and then it will assign into B. So this is called as explicit casting. Okay. User's intervention, programmer's intervention is there here at this point. He is indicating to which type this value should be converted into before being assigned to the target variable. So this type of casting is referred to as explicit casting. Here in the previous case, what we saw was implicit casting. This is an implicit casting. Okay. However, this is an explicit casting. Okay. In both cases, source type is lesser than the destination type. This is a desired feature. So what is happening? There is absolutely no problem when this is happening. When promotion or widening is happening, there is absolutely no problem to the system. But when the reverse happens, when source type is a longer type, is a larger type, say long A is equal to 5, byte B is equal to A and byte B is equal to A. What is happening here? Byte B is equal to A. Source type is a larger type, correct? Source type, it is the reverse. You are staying in a 8-bedroom house and you are paying some rent. Your house owner asks you to shift to immediately to 1-bedroom house. Okay, for the same rent. You are paying say 50,000 rupees for a 8-bedroom house. He is asking you to move to single bedroom house for the same rent, 50,000. Is it okay for you? It is not.
Yes, sir.
So you would have purchased so many items. Okay, so to match that house, you would have purchased so many items to your house. Correct? Can you go to that smaller single bedroom house with the entire luggage? Can you go to the single bedroom house? It is not possible. You have to leave some furniture in the 8-bedroom house only, and with only limited furniture, you can move to a single bedroom house. Correct? So that results in loss of what here? Furniture in this case. And here what happens? It results in loss of precision. Say for example, this is say float A is equal to 5.45. Okay, say this is float A is equal to 5.45. Here what am I trying to do? Byte B is equal to A. A is of larger type. Source is a larger type. Byte is a smaller type. What is going to happen? 5.45. I am trying to move into byte. So what is going to happen? Can it accommodate 5.45? It cannot accommodate 5.45. So it has to leave the baggage. Furniture no bit beko. So 0.45 is dropped, and only what can be moved into B? Only 5 can be moved into B. Is this acceptable? This results in loss of precision. Okay, precision is of utmost importance to us. So what is going to happen when I try to do this kind of assignment? What is going to happen? It results in dropping off the digits that come after the decimal point, and only the integer portion can be moved onto the variable present on the left side. So this is called as demotion, okay, or narrowing. Okay, narrowing or demotion should not be entertained. It is never acceptable. This one is never acceptable. However, promotion is acceptable. Okay, so you must be very careful while performing what is called as typecasting. So what do you mean by typecasting? Typecasting is a process of converting a value of one type into another type. That is called as typecasting or type conversion. We have two types of type conversion, namely explicit and implicit. Implicit is automatic conversion, when the conversion is happening automatically without the intervention of a programmer, okay, through a simple assignment statement. Then it is called as implicit. When the same is happening through the intervention of wherein he will be mentioning the desired type to which this value should be converted into. So then that is called as explicit casting. So in both cases, either in implicit or in explicit, I should always look at promotion or widening. That means the source type what I mentioned at the RHS should be of a smaller type compared to the target type, which is on the LHS. Okay, it should be of a larger type. When this is happening, it is called as widening. Widening is a desired feature. However, the reverse, okay, is not a desired feature, wherein the source type is a larger type and the destination type is a smaller type. So this is not recommended. So narrowing is never supported. You must always look at what is called as promotion or widening. So this is regarding type casting or type conversion. We will look at some of the operators that are available in Java. Okay, I will not discuss about all operators. All operators, whatever you are going to learn in C, the same operators are there even in Java. Okay, I will try to emphasize only on some new operators that were not present in C. Okay, are present here. I will try to discuss such operators only. Anyhow, while covering C portions, I can discuss about all the other types of operators. Okay. Now we have a special type of operators called as bitwise operators. Even in C, we have these bitwise operators. Okay. What are bitwise operators? Operators that perform an operation at the bit level. Say, for example, we have actually we have in C, in C++, and in Java, in all the three languages, we have these bitwise operators. We have three types of bitwise operators, namely bitwise logical operators, bitwise logical operators, bitwise shift operators, and bitwise ones complement operator. Bitwise ones complement operator. We have bitwise logical operators, bitwise shift operators, and bitwise ones complement operators. Okay, so the bitwise logical operators that are present are bitwise AND, which is denoted by single ampersand. Okay, say for example, A is 5. You have to consider 0, 1, 0, 1. You have to consider the binary equivalent of this value 1, 0, 1, 0, 1, 0, 1. So B is equal to 4, 0, 1, 0, 0. 0, 1, 0, 0 is the binary equivalent of 4. So when I am performing A single ampersand B, if I am writing, okay, this pen is not writing properly. Okay, if I am writing A single ampersand B, that is bitwise AND if I am performing, I need to perform AND operation on the individual bits. 1 into 0, AND is nothing but multiplication. 1 into 0 is 0, 0 into 0 is 0, 1 into 1 is 1. So this is the result what I get after I perform bitwise logical AND. Okay. In bitwise OR also I have, which is denoted by the single pipe. Here, instead of performing AND operation on the values, okay, what I will do, I will be performing OR operation, that is addition of these bits I will be doing, starting from this bit. 1 plus 0 is 1, 0 plus 0 is 0, 1 plus 1 is also considered as 1. So bitwise OR is 1, 0, 1. For the values A is equal to 5 and B is equal to 4, these are the answers for logical AND and logical OR. We also have logical XOR, which is denoted by the cap symbol. Okay, XOR operator, you know. Okay, XOR operator output is 1 when the inputs are dissimilar. For similar inputs, output is 0. That means 1 into 0. Inputs are dissimilar. This is 1 and this is 0. Output is 1. For similar inputs, 0, 0. Output is 0. 1, 1. Similar inputs. Output is 0. The output is 1 only when inputs are dissimilar. So 1 into 0, 1 plus 0 is 1. So for the same values, A is equal to 5 and B is equal to 4. If I perform bitwise XOR, I would be getting 0, 0, 1 as the answer. So this is bitwise logical operator. Okay, these operators are also present in C as well as in C++. They are also present in C++. Okay, then shift operators. I have left shift operator and I have right shift operators. These are the only two operators that are supported by C and C++. Java, along with these two, left shift, they are bending towards left. Okay, two less than symbols, bending towards left. Right shift, they are bending towards right. Okay, so they are therefore they are used to indicate right shift operation. Two greater than symbols. C and C++ would support only these two operators. However, Java supports one more additional operator called as unsigned right shift, which is denoted by three greater than symbols. This is called as unsigned right shift. Unsigned right shift. This is available only in Java. This is not available in C, or neither it is available in C nor it is available in C++. This is available only in Java. Unsigned right shift. Okay. Also, it is called as zero filled right shift. Okay, unsigned right shift or zero filled right shift. I will explain about this. Okay, so now left shift operation, if I am performing left shift operation, if I am performing, say I have the answer is say 0 0. This is the number 0001 is the number. Okay, I want, you know, binary places, you know. Okay, BCD 8421. If I move this one towards left once, if one is shifted to one place on the left side, okay, that is this way, the answer is what? 2. Answer becomes 2. When it is moved twice, answer becomes 4. When it is moved 3 times, okay, answer becomes 8, and so on. So left shift operation is nothing but multiplication with the powers of 2. With the powers of 2. Say for example, A is equal to 2. That is 0010. Okay, I want to shift this 2 times. I want to left shift the value of A 2 times. So what is the answer for A? Okay, when it is moved once, it becomes 4. When it moves the second time, what it becomes? It becomes 8. So you can say A is equal to A into 2 to the power whatever is there here. How many times it is asked, that you can consider as the power. A into 2 to the power 2. So this is the formula that you can use. What is the value of A? A's value is 2. 2 square is what? 4. 4 2s are 8 is the answer. Okay, so this way, so you can say that left shift operation is nothing but multiplication with the powers of 2. Left shift operation is multiplication with the powers of 2. Say if A value is say 3. If A value is 3, that is I have 1 under 2 and 1 under 1, and if I want to shift the bits towards the left side twice, what is the answer that I am going to get? 2 to the power 2 is common. Okay, then value of A is 3. 4 3s are 12. That means what do I get? When I do left shift twice, 0011 will become 1100. Okay, so multiplication, left shift operation is nothing but multiplication, and similarly right shift operation is nothing but right shift of 2 is there. Okay, it is nothing but division with the powers of 2. Instead of asterisk symbol, I am writing the slash symbol now. Okay, say A is equal to now what is the value? This is A value is now 12. I want to perform right shift operation. Right shift operation means how many places I want to move? 2 places. You drop the extreme right bits. Okay, 2 bits you drop. Shift the remaining bits towards the right side. 1 1. These vacant positions are now filled with zeros. Fill the vacant positions with zeros. What do you get now? 8421. Okay, what is the answer that you get? There is a 1 under 2, 1 under 1. So answer what you get is 3. So you can solve it this way also. What is the A value? A value is 12. 12 divided by okay, 2 to the power 2, that is 4. Okay, what is the answer that we get? 3. So right shift operation is nothing but division with the powers of 2. But remember, what happens is, if you are trying to use a negative number, you all know, if it is a negative number, this MSB is 1 for a negative number and it is 0 for a positive number. Correct? I am considering 8 bits. See, if it is plus 12, this bit is 0. Correct? If it is minus 12, okay, this bit definitely, I am not bothered about other bits. This bit position is, the bit position of MSB, that is called as the sign bit, is 1 for a negative number. You all know, you have studied different subjects such as computer organization and other things. There you have studied about the negative number representation. So sign bit is 1 for negative numbers. So when I am performing right shift operation, it will retain the sign bit. That means if 1 is there, if it is a negative number, it will not fill that position with a 0 and make the result as positive. If you are performing a right shift operation on a negative number, the answer what you get is also a negative result. Okay, that means it retains the sign bit as it is. A normal right shift operation, if I am using normal right shift, which is denoted by 2 greater than symbols, this would okay, retain the sign bit. It would retain the sign bit. If it is a negative number, it will retain 1 as it is. Excuse me. Hello, sir. ಹೌದಾ ಟೈಮ್ ಆಗುತ್ತಾ ಜಾಸ್ತಿ ಹೊತ್ತಾಗುತ್ತಲ್ಲ ಸರ್ ಓಕೆ ಬಿಟ್ಬಿಡ್ತೀನಿ ಓಕೆ so I will discuss about this in my next class. In my next class I will also show a Java program about these bitwise operators. Thank you very much for your patience, okay, for your patient listening. Thank you. Bye bye. Your class is there. I think your electrical teacher is waiting. Okay, I shall stop my class at this point of time.